The golden horizon swallowed the last remnants of daylight as Rose O'Sullivan trudged up the dusty path toward the abandoned farmhouse, her medical bag swinging heavily against her side. The year was 1885, and drought had turned the once prosperous farmlands of western Kansas into a wasteland of broken dreams and empty promises. Rose had arrived in Cottonwood Springs just 3 months prior, answering an advertisement for a town doctor. At 26, she was one of the few female physicians who had managed to secure a practice west of the Mississippi. The townsfolk had been skeptical at first. A woman doctor was rare enough to raise eyebrows, but her gentle manner and skilled hands had gradually won them over. Today's journey took her beyond the town limits to check on a patient she'd heard about through whispered conversations at the general store. A cowboy, they said, who'd staked everything on a wheat harvest that never came. He'd been holed up in his farmhouse for weeks, refusing help, slowly wasting away with the land he'd failed to tame. As Rose approached the dilapidated structure, she noted the neglected fields stretching into the distance, cracked earth where green shoots should have been thriving. The barn leaned precariously to one side, its weathered boards bleached nearly white by the relentless sun. A lone horse nickered softly from within. "Hello," she called, knocking firmly on the door frame. The hinges creaked as the door swung inward at her touch, revealing a dim interior that smelled of dust and despair. In the shadows, a figure stirred. "Whoever you are, go away. I didn't ask for company." The voice was rough from disuse, but unmistakably young, not the voice of the broken-down old rancher she'd been led to expect. "I'm Dr. O'Sullivan from town," Rose replied, stepping inside despite the unwelcoming tone. "I heard you might need medical attention." "What I need, doctor, is rain." "Can you make that happen?" The bitterness in his words was palpable. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, Rose made out the form of a man seated at a crude wooden table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey before him. He couldn't have been more than 30, though the weeks of hardship had etched lines around his eyes that aged him considerably. His broad shoulders were slumped in defeat, and his once powerful frame had grown lean with hunger. "No," she answered honestly, setting her bag down. "But I can help with whatever else ails you." He looked up then, and Rose caught her breath. Despite the grime and several weeks' worth of beard, there was something striking about his features: high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. "Vincent Irving," he said finally. "Though there isn't much left of the man who used to answer to that name." Rose moved closer, her practiced eye assessing his condition. "When did you last eat a proper meal, Mr. Irving?" "The name's Vince," he corrected, "and I don't rightly remember." Without asking permission, Rose opened her medical bag and withdrew a parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house packed me some bread and cold chicken. You'll eat while I examine you." "I don't need, you'll eat," Rose repeated firmly, unwrapping the food and placing it before him. "Or I'll tell everyone in town that the great Vincent Irving was too stubborn to accept help when he needed it most." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You fight dirty for a lady doctor." "I fight to keep my patients alive, Mr. Irving. Now eat." To her satisfaction, he began to eat, slowly at first and then with increasing appetite as his body remembered its hunger. While he ate, Rose moved around the small cabin, opening shutters to let in light and air. "How long have you been farming this land?" she asked, noting the crude furnishings and few personal possessions. Vincent swallowed a mouthful of bread before answering. "I'm not a farmer. Or at least, I wasn't born to it. I was a cowboy with the Diamond K outfit until last year." His eyes drifted to a framed daguerreotype on the mantel, the only decoration in the sparse room. Rose followed his gaze. "Family," My brother James and his wife. They died of typhoid back east. This was their homestead. I came to save it when James took ill, thinking I could keep it going until they recovered. He took another bite, chewing mechanically. By the time I got word they'd passed, I'd already put everything I had into this year's crop. Rose felt a pang of sympathy. And then the drought came. Vincent nodded, his expression hardening. 6 months without proper rain. The wheat never had a chance. He gestured toward the window. 30 acres, all withered and dead, just like everything else I touch. Not everything, Rose countered, nodding toward the horse in the barn. That animal looks well cared for. Silverado's all I've got left. Couldn't let him suffer for my mistakes. Rose pulled a chair opposite him and sat down. What were you planning to do, Mr. Irving? Drink yourself to death in this empty house? He met her gaze squarely. Seemed as good a plan as any. Well, I'm afraid I can't allow it. Rose reached across the table and took his wrist, feeling for his pulse. His skin was warm, his heartbeat strong despite his malnourished state. As the only doctor in Cottonwood Springs, I have a professional obligation to prevent such foolishness. Vincent pulled his arm away. You've done your duty, doctor. You can report to whoever sent you that I'm still breathing. No one sent me officially, Rose admitted. I heard about you at Thornton's store and decided to come myself. For the first time, genuine surprise registered on his face. Why would you bother? Rose considered the question. In truth, she wasn't entirely sure what had compelled her to make the 3-mile journey to this isolated farmhouse. There were plenty of troubles closer to town that demanded her attention. Because that's what neighbors do, she said finally. They look after one another. Vincent's laugh was hollow. I've been here 8 months and haven't met half the people in Cottonwood Springs. I'm no neighbor. You are now, Rose said decisively, standing and moving to her bag again. I'm going to leave you some tonic to help with your strength. You need to eat regularly and get some proper sleep without that. She nodded toward the whiskey bottle. And then what? Vincent asked, a challenge in his voice. And then you decide if you're going to let one failed harvest define the rest of your life, Rose replied evenly. The land may be dead for now, but you're not, Mr. Irving. As she prepared to leave, Vincent walked her to the door, moving with more energy than he'd shown when she arrived. In the doorway, he paused. You never said your first name, Dr. O'Sullivan. It's Rose, she replied, surprised by the warmth that crept into her cheeks under his steady gaze. Rose, he repeated as if testing the sound. Like the flower that grows even in difficult soil. With enough care and patience, she agreed. I'll return in 3 days to check on you, Mr. Irving. Vince, he corrected again, and I'll be here. As Rose made her way back toward town, the setting sun at her back, she found herself smiling. There was life yet in Vincent Irving, buried beneath the grief and disappointment. With the right nurturing, that life might bloom again just like the roses her mother had tended so carefully back in Boston, coaxing beauty from the most stubborn ground. True to her word, Rose returned 3 days later. To her surprise, she found Vincent outside, repairing the sagging front porch. He'd bathed and shaved, and though still thin, his eyes had lost their hollow desperation. You look better, she observed, setting down her medical bag. Feel better, he admitted, driving a nail with practiced strokes. Your tonic helped, and I've been sleeping. The whiskey. Poured it out the night you left, he straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. Figured if I'm going to die, it won't be at the bottom of a bottle. Rose smiled. That's progress. Vincent gestured toward the porch. Would you care to sit for a spell? I made coffee. Over steaming cups of surprisingly good coffee, Vincent shared more of his story. He'd been a cowboy since he was 16, riding with outfits across Texas and Kansas. When his brother had written about homesteading in Kansas, Vincent had scoffed at the idea of settling down to farm. "The irony is that I came to hate the constant moving," he confessed. "Always sleeping under the stars, riding for days with nothing but your thoughts and the creak of leather. Started to envy James and his quiet life, his little house, his wife." "Is that why you stayed after they were gone?" Rose asked. "Because you wanted that life for yourself," Vincent considered this. "Maybe, or maybe I just couldn't bear the thought of strangers living in the house my brother built." He shook his head. "Either way, I've made a mess of it." "Not necessarily," Rose argued. "One failed crop doesn't mean you've failed as a farmer. Even experienced farmers lose harvests to weather." "Maybe so, but I've got nothing left to plant with. No seed, no money to buy more." He sipped his coffee. "The bank in Hayes City holds the mortgage. They'll foreclose by winter if I can't make a payment." Rose thought of the drought-stricken farms surrounding Cottonwood Springs. Many families were struggling, but few had given up entirely. "What about cattle? You know cattle, don't you?" "I do, but good breeding stock costs money I don't have. And the land needs work before it could support a herd." He sighed. "No, I think my time here is done. Once I get the place fixed up, I'll try to sell it, pay off the bank, and move on." "Where will you go?" Vincent shrugged. "Back to what I know. There's always work for a good hand in Texas." Rose felt an unexpected twinge of disappointment at the thought of Vincent leaving. She'd only just met him, yet something about his quiet strength and vulnerability moved her. "Well, until then, you need to regain your strength," she said briskly, changing the subject. "I've brought more supplies, some dried beans and salt pork from my own pantry." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "I didn't ask for charity, Rose." "It's not charity. It's an investment," she replied. "Once you're back on your feet, you can repay me by helping with some repairs at my clinic. The roof leaks something terrible when it rains." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That seems fair." As summer gave way to autumn, Vincent became a familiar sight in Cottonwood Springs. True to their agreement, he repaired Rose's clinic roof, then stayed to fix the sagging steps and build new shelves for her medical supplies. In return, Rose drove out to his farm twice a week, bringing food and company. The townsfolk noticed. Whispers followed Rose through the general store and across the churchyard on Sundays. Some were concerned about her reputation, a single woman spending so much time with the brooding former cowboy. Others, like Abigail Thornton, the storekeeper's wife, were more direct. "He's quite handsome now that he's cleaned up," Abigail remarked one afternoon as Rose selected tea leaves. "And not much older than you, I'd wager." "Mr. Irving is my patient, Abigail," Rose replied evenly. "Nothing more." But as the weeks passed, Rose found it increasingly difficult to maintain the pretense that her interest in Vincent was purely professional. She looked forward to their conversations, to the quiet moments when he would describe the open prairie at dawn, or the way a herd of cattle moved like a single living organism across the plains. He spoke with poetry about a life she'd never known, and in turn, she shared stories of Boston, of medical school, of her dream to practice medicine where it was truly needed. For Vincent's part, he began to view Rose's visits as the bright spots in an otherwise uncertain existence. He found himself watching the road on the days she was due to arrive, and the sound of her buggy's wheels would cause his heart to quicken in a way he hadn't experienced in years. In late September, Rose arrived at the farm to find Vincent with company, a lean, weathered man in a cattleman's duster examining the outbuildings. "Rose," Vincent called, waving her over. "This is Thomas Blackwell, foreman of the Triple R Ranch outside of Dodge. Tom, this is Dr. Rose O'Sullivan." "Madam," Blackwell tipped his hat. Vince here has been telling me about your doctoring skills. Says you saved his life this summer." Rose smiled, aware of Vincent's eyes on her. "Mr. Irving exaggerates. He saved himself by choosing to live." "Well, I'm trying to convince him to choose living with us at the Triple R," Blackwell said. "We need an experienced hand for the fall roundup, and Vince was one of the best horsemen I ever worked with back in Texas." Vincent looked conflicted. "Tom's offering good wages." "Enough to keep the bank at bay for a few more months." Rose felt her chest tighten. "When would you leave?" "Tomorrow, if he's of a mind to," Blackwell answered. "Roundup starts next week." "I haven't decided yet," Vincent said quickly. "It would only be temporary, just until I figure out what to do with the farm." Blackwell excused himself to examine the corral, leaving Rose and Vincent alone by the porch. "You should go," Rose said, though the words cost her. "It's a good opportunity." Vincent stepped closer. "I'd be back in a month, maybe 6 weeks. The Triple R isn't far, of course." Rose nodded, maintaining her composure through force of will. "Your medical care is essentially complete anyway. I'm sure you'll do well with the Triple R." Vincent's expression fell. "Is that all it was, medical care?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken feelings. Rose knew the professional answer, yes, that was all it should have been, but her heart protested loudly. "No," she admitted quietly. "It became something more, at least for me." Vincent's relief was visible. "For me too." He reached out, his calloused fingers brushing hers tentatively. "That's why I've been hesitating. The thought of leaving, even temporarily." "You need the work," Rose said firmly, though she didn't withdraw her hand from his. "And a month isn't so very long." In the end, Vincent rode out with Blackwell the next morning. Rose stood on the porch of her small house at the edge of town, watching them disappear into the distance. She told herself it was for the best. Vincent needed to reconnect with the work he knew, to earn enough money to have real choices about his future. And she needed space to sort through her growing feelings for a man she'd known just a few short months. The days stretched into weeks, each one longer than the last. Rose threw herself into her practice, making calls to outlying farms, sitting with Mrs. Peterson's newborn twins through a night of croup, setting Joe Miller's broken arm after a fall from the livery stable loft. Every few days, a letter would arrive from Vincent. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant for a cowboy, his descriptions of life on the Triple R vivid and engaging. He wrote of dawn rides and midnight watches, of cattle rustlers apprehended at the territory line, of nights spent under stars so bright they seemed to sing. And in each letter, beneath the colorful tales, ran an undercurrent of longing. "I think of you in the quiet moments," he wrote. "When the day's work is done and the campfire has burned low, I remember the sound of your laughter and the way sunlight catches in your hair." Rose kept the letters tied with a ribbon in her bedside drawer. She read them so often that the paper grew soft along the creases, the words nearly memorized. When she wrote back, she was more reserved, sharing news of the town and her patients, careful not to reveal too much of the ache his absence had created. October gave way to November. The first frost silvered the grass, and the days grew shorter. Rose began to worry. Vincent had written that the roundup would end by the first week of November, yet there was no sign of him. Then, on a blustery Tuesday afternoon, Abigail Thornton burst into Rose's clinic, her cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. "He's back," she announced without preamble. "And not alone." Rose's heart faltered. "What do you mean?" Vincent Irving rode in 10 minutes ago with a wagon full of supplies and 3 of the finest heifers I've ever seen. Bert says they're Herefords, all the way from the Triple Articus breeding stock. Confusion mingled with relief in Rose's mind. "He brought cattle," and seed corn and building materials. Abigail's eyes sparkled with town gossip. Bert says Blackwell sold him the heifers at half price and fronted him the stud fee for a triple R bull come spring. Says he's planning to start a small herd, breed them up over time. Rose sat down heavily on her examining stool. He's staying, then. Looks that way. Abigail peered at Rose closely. He asked after you first thing, wanted to know if you were well, if you'd had any trouble while he was gone. Her expression softened. He's headed this way, Rose. I slipped out the back of the store to warn you. Before Rose could respond, the clinic door opened, bringing a swirl of autumn air and the man who had occupied her thoughts for 6 long weeks. Vincent stood framed in the doorway, hat in hand, his face tanned from the outdoor work, his eyes searching the room until they found her. Rose, he said simply, and in that one word she heard everything he couldn't say with Abigail present. Abigail, bless her heart, knew when to make herself scarce. Well, I should get back to help Bert with the inventory, she said, edging toward the door. Welcome home, Mr. Irving. When the door closed behind her, Rose and Vincent remained still, drinking in the sight of each other across the small room. You came back, Rose said finally. I told you I would. Vincent stepped forward, placing his hat on her desk. I kept my promise. Abigail says you brought cattle. He nodded. 3 Hereford heifers, good stock, hardy enough to survive our winters, efficient foragers. Blackwell says they'll do well even on marginal grazing land. So you're staying. It wasn't a question this time. I am. Vincent moved closer until only a few feet separated them. I earned enough to pay off the bank through spring and start a small herd. It won't be easy, but with careful management I can build it over time. Rose felt happiness bubble up inside her. You're going to be a rancher instead of a farmer. A small distinction, perhaps. Vincent smiled, and the sight of it warmed her through. But I know cattle better than crops, and there's good water on the north section of the property, even in dry years. The Triple R started with just 5 heifers 20 years ago, and now they run 2,000 head. That's wonderful, Vince. I'm so happy for you. His expression grew serious. There's something else, Rose, something I need to say. Rose's pulse quickened. Yes. Every night while I was gone, I'd read your letters by lamplight. The other hands teased me something fierce about it. He took another step toward her. But I didn't care, because those words were my lifeline. They reminded me that there was someone worth coming back for. Rose couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. I kept thinking about what you said the first day we met, Vincent continued. That the land may be dead for now, but I wasn't. You made me see that there was still life possible, still growth, even after loss. He reached for her hand. It was your smile, Rose. Your smile was the only thing still growing in my world when everything else had withered away. Rose let him take her hand, feeling the work-roughened warmth of his fingers enveloping hers. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you too, more than I can say. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I know I don't have much to offer yet. The farm is still a work in progress, and it'll be years before the herd is substantial. But I'm asking if you might consider. The clinic door burst open, revealing a frantic-looking young boy. Dr. O'Sullivan, come quick. Pa's been kicked by the plow horse. Rose and Vincent jumped apart. Where is he, Billy? Rose asked, already reaching for her medical bag. At home. Ma sent me to fetch you right away. Rose looked apologetically at Vincent. I have to go. Of course you do. He reached for his hat. May I call on you tomorrow to finish our conversation? Yes, Rose replied, her heart pounding with anticipation. I'd like that very much. The Peterson farm was 3 miles northeast of town. By the time Rose had set Michael Peterson's broken ribs and administered something for the pain, darkness had fallen. Mrs. Peterson insisted Rose stay for supper, and then spend the night rather than risk the journey back to town in the dark. Rose slept fitfully, her mind replaying Vincent's words and imagining what he might have been about to propose before they were interrupted. By morning, she was both exhausted and exhilarated, eager to return to town and the conversation they'd left unfinished. To her surprise, as she hitched her buggy after breakfast, she spotted a familiar figure approaching on horseback. Vincent, astride Silverado, cantered up the lane to the Peterson farmhouse. "Vince," Rose exclaimed as he dismounted, "what are you doing here? When you didn't return to town last night, I got worried," he admitted. "I stopped by your clinic this morning and Mrs. Thornton told me you were probably still out here." Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway, eyeing Vincent with undisguised interest. "Dr. O'Sullivan, who's your friend?" Rose made the introductions, feeling suddenly self-conscious under Mrs. Peterson's knowing gaze. After assuring Vincent that Mr. Peterson was resting comfortably and would recover fully, Rose prepared to take her leave. "I can see myself back to town," she told Vincent as they walked toward her buggy. "You must have work waiting at your farm. It can wait a few hours." His voice was firm. "I'll ride alongside you, if you don't mind the company." The autumn morning was crisp and clear, the sky a deep blue canopy above the golden prairie. As they traveled, Vincent told Rose more about his plans for the farm, a small but quality breeding operation that would focus on hardy stock suited to the Kansas climate. "The drought was devastating, but it taught me something valuable," he reflected. "The land here has its own rhythms, its own harsh beauty. Fighting against that is futile, but working with it, adapting to its ways, there's promise in that approach." Rose smiled, remembering the broken man she'd found just months ago. "You sound like a true Kansas farmer now." "Rancher," he corrected with a grin, "and I have you to thank for it. Me, I didn't do anything extraordinary. You showed up," Vincent said simply. "When everyone else had written me off, you came to that run-down farmhouse and refused to let me give up." He guided Silverado closer to her buggy. "You saw something in me worth saving, Rose." "I saw a good man going through a difficult time," she replied softly. "Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't, and that's what makes you special." He paused, then added, "That's why I love you." Rose pulled her buggy to a sudden stop, her hands trembling on the reins. "What did you say?" Vincent halted Silverado and dismounted, moving to stand beside her buggy. "I said I love you, Rose O'Sullivan. I think I started falling the moment you walked into that dark house and ordered me to eat." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know I'm still finding my footing, but I also know that what I feel for you is real and lasting." Rose's heart pounded against her ribs. "Vince, you don't have to say anything now," he assured her. "I just wanted you to know where I stand. When I'm more established, when I can offer you a proper home, I hope you'll consider becoming my wife." He reached up to take her gloved hand. "Until then, may I court you properly? Sunday dinners, church socials, buggy rides when the weather permits." Tears blurred Rose's vision. All her life, she'd focused on her career, on proving herself in a profession dominated by men. Romance had seemed a distant, unlikely prospect. Yet here was this remarkable man offering her a love she hadn't dared to hope for. "You don't need to wait until you're established," she said, her voice wavering. "I love you too, Vince, just as you are." Joy transformed his face. In one fluid motion, Vincent pulled himself up onto the buggy seat beside her. His hands cradled her face with infinite tenderness, and when he kissed her, Rose felt as though all of creation held its breath. They were married the following spring, as the first green shoots emerged from the once barren fields. The small white church in Cottonwood Springs overflowed with well-wishers' patients Rose had treated. Ranchers Vincent had worked alongside at the Triple R, townspeople who had watched their love story unfold with collective approval. Rose continued her medical practice, dividing her time between her clinic in town and their growing ranch. Vincent's small herd expanded steadily, his careful breeding program producing cattle that thrived in the challenging Kansas environment. Together, they weathered the inevitable hardships of frontier life: another drought year, a devastating blizzard, the occasional illness that swept through the community. 3 years after their wedding, Rose gave birth to twins, a boy they named James, after Vincent's brother, and a girl they called Elizabeth, after Rose's mother. Vincent built an addition to the farmhouse, with large windows that allowed sunlight to flood the nursery, and a wide porch where Rose could rock the babies while watching the cattle graze on distant hills. On their 5th anniversary, as they sat on that porch in the golden light of sunset, Vincent took Rose's hand in his. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying a broken-down cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination?" Rose looked out over their land, the healthy cattle dotting the hillside, the sturdy barn and outbuildings, the vegetable garden flourishing behind the house. Then she turned back to Vincent, taking in the laugh lines around his eyes, the quiet confidence that had replaced his despair. "Never," she answered truthfully. "The man I married wasn't broken, he was just waiting for the right season to grow again." She leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him against her. "And look at what we've cultivated together." From inside the house came the sound of childish laughter as the twins played with the carved wooden animals Vincent had made them. Above, the vast Kansas sky deepened toward twilight, promising stars beyond counting. "You were right, you know," Vincent murmured against her hair. "That first day when you said not everything I touched withered and died." Rose smiled up at him. "What made you finally believe it?" Vincent's arms tightened around her. "Your smile," he said. "Even when everything else had failed, your smile was the only thing still growing. And it gave me permission to grow too." As darkness settled over the prairie, they remained on the porch, two hearts beating as one, surrounded by the life they had built together from the ashes of broken dreams.